Hey, this is Todd coming at you this morning for a quick stream to go over something that I posted to Patreon. I think it was actually on Saturday. I meant it to be for Friday. It's something I post as kind of I'm calling it Freebie Fridays. I'm trying to get more active, trying to support the people who have been supporting me. So posting things to Patreon for people who are subscribing. I welcome you if you'd like to join. I think I just have a $1 level and a $5 level just to be feeling generous. But anything you'd like to contribute is great. But on Fridays, I've been posting stuff that is, free for any dissemination. Just go to my Patreon, Hexed Press, and you will be able to find it. And I thought I would go over it today because I thought it was actually a good idea. Something I've been thinking about for a while, different ways to work with it. What I'm talking about is inspiration. Inspiration, I think, is a really, underutilized resource in 5th edition. I think the reason why it's underutilized is because it doesn't have clear mechanics associated to it. Yes, there are mechanical things that you can do with inspiration, and in fact, I think I'd like to even expand on those a little bit. Add more things that you can use inspiration for as a currency. But it's how you actually get inspiration that has been sort of a recurring problem in a lot of games. People forget about it. People don't give them out. Or sometimes when you give it out, it's very opaque. Things like you kind of have to wait for the GM just to say, oh, I think you've earned inspiration, and so here you go. And some of those may be good. There may be good motives behind that. I think I saw in one of Matt Colville's videos talking about his game that he likes to give it out when the players uncover some information or sort of secret knowledge or hard to get knowledge about the world, that he will dole out inspiration, which is great. The problem is, as a player, how do you plan for that? I want everything to be that players can really go into the game and try to accomplish something, right? I want players to try to achieve inspiration. And how can they do that with something that is essentially you'll know it when you get it kind of thing? You can't go into the game saying today or in this scene, I'm going to try to get inspiration, because it might not be there for you, which I guess it would be fine if you knew where you could get it. But if it's something like, okay, you got to make the whole table laugh, or you got to uncover some secret bit of knowledge, these things are not, you can try to do them. Sure, you can try to make everybody laugh or do whatever other meta thing your GM wants you to do, but you can't really plan on that. So I wanted to take inspiration and turn it into something that, hey, it's transparent now, it's player driven. I wanted to have consequences. I don't want it to be just a freebie that you give away. I want it to be something that you have to do something to earn, and there might be a cost associated with doing that. I don't know, just for me, the idea of just saying, hey, you want it, so you get it, doesn't appeal to me on any level, and certainly not with inspiration. So on Friday or Saturday, what I had put together was what I call it as ideals and flaws, which brings together, again, inspiration like I just talked about, but also this other thing, which is a different way to look at potentially at alignment or backgrounds or things to do with character creation in ways that are mechanically motivated. I've talked about this in different videos before. I'm actually a fan of alignments, but the problem is one, they often are, we all have so many different definitions, right? That you end up with a disconnect between the definition that a player may have, or that you may have as a player, and that your DM has. And there's a lot of conflict over, well, I'm that good, and I think that means this, and the GM thinks it means that, or other players thinks that means something else. And it's hard to then take all that and meld it into something that's useful at the table, particularly in a game like 5th edition, where they've taken all the mechanical hooks of alignment and they basically remove them. So it's really only there for a role-playing purpose, and then it can be very frustrating when people don't share the same role-playing values for alignments that you do. Now, of course, you can square some or all of that away during session 0 and really having good communication as a table, but still, it's maybe not what it could be. So what I thought of, and this could be instead of alignments, it could be in addition to alignments, but I wanted to take something and say, okay, I want to use inspiration, but I want it to be mechanically transparent. I want to tie that into something that kind of gives me that sort of alignment feel, because I like it, and because it's something outside of combat that we can talk. Because one of the things I wanted to do is I didn't want to just tie into combat. I didn't want to be, oh, if you're a fighter or anybody and you do the killing blow, then you get inspiration. Or you get a critical hit, you get inspiration. Like, I think there's enough stuff in 5th edition and D&D in general that keys off of combat, that I wanted something that built off of more character moments. And I also wanted to be something that maybe you have to actually introduce your own obstacles to get. It would be something that wasn't going to be just success off of success. And I know other systems have similar things where, you actually start to get experience points and stuff off of failures. And I didn't really necessarily want that, but I wanted to do something where I'll encourage players to look at their characters, think of what obstacles they could come up with their characters, introduce them in the game, and then get some kind of reward for doing so. So they've increased their difficulty in a sense. They've put obstacles in front of them, but they're going to get inspiration, which might help them bail them out, or at least gives them this kind of, again, that currency that they can spend for doing so. So what I came up with was just this little one pager, which I have, you can see on the screen, called Ideals and Flaws. And the idea behind this is that you will, at character creation, you will pick 1 or 2 ideals and then 1 or 2 flaws. And ideals are things that you believe in, your core beliefs in a sense. But the way they're posited here, it's almost more qualities. I wanted to put them in terms of qualities that you prize above everything else. So in this case, with ideals, they're things that not necessarily are all good qualities. They're things like strength and power and loyalty. Following alignment. It could be chaos. It could be evil with a capital E. It could be good with a capital G. It could be law. It could be faith. Friendship, courage, honor. Those are the ones that came to my mind. So I put them there. They're sort of deliberately vague because I want you to have room to maneuver in there. And I want to be something that, hey, like add your own things to the list. Add your own, what do you believe in as a player? Maybe you have an idea for your character that you want to explore. So toss it in. And these are the ones that are sort of, in a sense, positive. Again, they don't have to be positive in terms of their value, because evil with a capital E isn't good, but it's something you believe in. And the idea here is when you are up against something that a challenge, you can take that power and something you believe in and use that to get advantage. And again, I really didn't want this to be in combat. I wanted it to be something that really more social situations. I didn't write that in there. Maybe I should make a second version where I say that I'm really meaning these for kind of social situations. So what might happen here is, for example, faith, that you are in a situation where maybe you are being interrogated by a guy, a religious figure, and you want to use your faith, right? The fact that you have this faith to empower you in a sense. So you get, and that something's coming on, maybe you have to roll for, say diplomacy. And this is a religious figure. So you say, I'm going to draw upon my faith to really, add some kind of spirituality, really speak to this church figure. You get advantage on that die roll. So it's kind of like in a sense that's one use of inspiration, right? So that's kind of an inspiration like moves. You get that die roll. The catch is that you can only do it once per long rest if you choose 2. So if you choose 2 ideals, each one you can invoke. And I stole this from Fate. Somebody called me out on, I think, Facebook. Hey, you pulled those out of Fate. I'm like, yeah, I did. They're great words. I use invoke and then compel for flaws. But the idea is you can invoke this ideal of yours, and it gives you advantage. If you have one ideal, I call it a major ideal, you get that once per short rest. If you get minor ideals, you get once per long rest. So it's kind of like, if you want to spread out more, then you get them less often, right? So you're essentially spreading your ideals out there, which gives you more opportunities to call on them, because if you only have faith, maybe there are less opportunities in your adventuring day to call upon your faith. But if you had faith and courage, then maybe you'd have those more often to do, so you get them less. So the idea was that the more you might be able to apply yourself, in other words, the more broad you have your ideals, the less often you can call upon them. The more focused you are if you're focused on a single ideal, then you can call upon it more often. And I was kind of thinking that you would get 1 or 2 short rests per adventuring period. So that number, feel free to adjust it to whatever fits. If you have a group and you're taking short rests every 10 minutes, and then a major ideal becomes really powerful. I was thinking maybe, again, I could update it to say, hey, max twice before a long rest. Cause that's really kind of what I was thinking is like either you get a minor one twice, you get a major one twice, more or less, and a minor one twice, once each for twice. So I wanted to kind of have 2 and 2. But it's funny as I'm reading this out loud. This is why I always have copy editors and things. I'm noticing a couple of corrections that I could make. So on the flip side is flaws. Now, the idea of flaws obviously is, of course, it's a character weakness, right? And one of the things I find with players often is you create these weaknesses and either you never play them or you play them very rarely. You're looking at it and you pick something and then you kind of never want to see it again. And I get that because weaknesses aren't that fun. I mean, some people have a lot of fun with it. You have your weakness and, like I just said, you often are looking at it and you're often thinking, yeah, I don't really want to ever play this weakness. There's no advantage, unless I'm really into the role play, there's no advantage to me playing this weakness. It's just going to kind of bite me in the butt and all I'm going to get out of it is trouble. So why do it? So you have these flaws. And as I say in the document, right, flaws are weaknesses that your character constantly struggles, not always successfully with. So we're taking this concept of the flaw, this weakness, but I want to reward players for actively struggling with their flaws. To me, it makes for the great characters. When you look at, to take, say, Lord of the Rings, the kind of classic epic fantasy, trilogy, book, series. Look at characters like Boromir, characters like, okay, Aragorn and Faramir don't really have them too much, but Boromir is kind of a classic character. He has, these flaws that, come to dominate him. Or, say the dwarves with and elves too. Like if you read the Silmarillion about the Silmarils was how it activated all these creatures' greed. They had to have it, the selfishness. They had to have it for themselves and all the trouble that caused. I really think that, and whether you read comic books or other fictional works, you ought to see that all these characters that we love have these weaknesses that they have to struggle with. That's part of that role playing. But so often we kind of forget about that in the role playing game, the fact that our characters have these weaknesses or we use them when they're convenient, right? That, I conveniently will do this stuff because it doesn't have much of an impact. I can kind of laugh it off. But when it's really, when the rubber hits the road, I'm going to kind of forget that I have that. That's the kind of thing that happens. So I wanted to make it in a sense, okay, I want you to play your weakness, but it's not me as the GM telling you, play your weakness right now, forcing you to make a save or play your weakness. What I wanted to do is have something in which if you're a player and you play your weaknesses, you get rewards. If you're a player and you don't play your weaknesses, you just don't get those rewards. And hopefully over time, the fact that you're going to be getting, in this case, the reward is inspiration, that hopefully the fact that the players who are doing this are getting the stream of inspiration, which gives them, +5 rolls, maybe once or twice, 3 times. I don't know how often they do it in a game, that over time that them getting those extra rolls, getting those extra advantages will affect the other players and make it into a worthwhile equation, make the math work for them. Like, okay, this is going to make things more difficult for me, but I'm going to get this inspiration that I can hold on to and use. So maybe it's worth it. And if everybody's doing it and everybody's getting inspiration, I feel like it works better in the party. Because I know sometimes what can happen is you'll create a character with some kind of interesting flaw, or you think it's an interesting flaw, but in the party dynamic, it becomes that thing where everyone just kind of gets annoyed. Like, oh gosh, he's doing this thing again. Because it just seems like it's self-aggrandizing or putting the spotlight on you. It doesn't help the party. It might help you if it's one of those, I'm the rogue that steals everything from everyone. Like it kind of helps you because you're stealing stuff. It's just kind of annoying to everybody else, and it doesn't benefit them really in any way because most of the time you're probably stealing from the other party members or you're stealing from shopkeepers that just get you and everybody in trouble. And there's no real benefit to it because it's not like you're stealing really worthwhile stuff. Like the extra gold or whatever you might get is not worth the hassle of you acting like a kleptomaniac all the time. But in this case, getting inspiration means that you potentially, when things are rough in a combat or in a social encounter, that you could throw the inspiration and help the team. And if everybody's doing this and everyone's creating these obstacles, but also helping the team, I think it'll take some of the sting off of when these weaknesses come to the fore and the party has to deal with them, because you are earning something. You're earning something in return, and what you're earning is not just potentially for you. It's on a die roll, which means you're probably doing something for the rest of the party, helping them in some way. And so it feels like you're putting something back. You're not just taking the spotlight and just making trouble for trouble's sake. You're kind of delivering back. So let's get into some of the weaknesses that I mentioned here: greed, cowardice, vengeance, lust, fear, deceit, gluttony, intolerance, cruelty, selfishness. Right? These 7 deadly sins kind of stuff. Again, you can act on your own. Obviously, I felt like these flaws are not really. I was trying to separate things. I didn't want ideals that sounded too much like a flaw, and I didn't want flaws that seemed too much like they could be somebody's ideals. Like, I think that wanting power and strength is an ideal, and not just for evil types, but even people who are good often might appreciate strength. Like, I think knights and fighters probably appreciate strong characters, strong creatures. That doesn't mean that they are vengeful and they just want to, destroy all their enemies, or it doesn't mean that they're cruel or intolerant, right? And you can be evil and not be greedy, because oftentimes greedy is maybe the downfall of the evil character because they push too far. So like, I see an evil character, and maybe that evil character values power more than anything. Greed is still a weakness in that regard, because greed is when you're pushing things too far. Greed is the part that, yeah, you want power, but now your judgment is being clouded. And I don't see greed as being an ideal. I know Gordon Gekko's classic greed is good, but really you're not doing things just to be greedy. Greed is that part of your drive for something else that just, at least the way I think of it, overrides things. So I wanted to keep sort of a clear separation. So if you make your own flaws and ideals, you want to make sure they're separate, that there's no real crossover. You don't want people to argue, oh, my flaw is really my ideal, or this, that. You just want to keep them kind of separate. And of course, with flaws, I talk about compelling, which mea culpa comes straight out of Fate because it's great language. I couldn't think of anything better, and Fate has it kind of nailed. So I'm stealing it. And I'm just going to read here. A character is compelled by their flaws. When a character finds their choices in conflict with their flaw, they can choose to face their compulsion. To do so, they make a compulsion check. So here, this one does have a die roll attached to it. And the idea here is that you, as the player who has a flaw, will choose if you're in a situation that flaw applies to. So, for example, you're in a throne room, and there is you're dealing with the king, whatever. There's a golden, his scepter of office, or his seal is kind of sitting, and it's sort of an easy view. It's tempting. So again, as the GM, I am not telling you, there's a seal over there. You better roll against your flaw for, greed, to see if you try to swipe it. This is totally, you could choose to ignore it, which just means that your character is not, either didn't see it or whatever. It just means that it's not interesting to them. Or you can choose, as a player, you will choose to say, you know what, that seal is inviting, and I feel like my character is going to struggle not to try to steal it, because it's just too welcome a target, and we're just in a situation, it may never be here again, and whatever, I feel like it's too valuable. The dollar signs are going off in their head. They're just going to try. So now I guess you could probably play it that you just give into it. But what I have is here the die roll for this, the compulsion check, is that internal struggle, as that moment in the movie where they might have a close up and the eyes are kind of doing and moving from side to side, and the sweat is starting to bead when they're struggling against whether to do this or not. And they know their better judgment says, don't touch that damn seal. But there's that little devil on their shoulder saying, go ahead, take it. It's right there. No one will see you. Right. So that's that moment. So we have this check. Now, the trick is with the check is the idea here for me is that the more powerful you get, the higher level you are, the stronger your flaws come out, not the weaker you get. So at low levels, it might be relatively easy to overcome your flaw. I have it 10 plus, half your character level rounded down. So if your first level, second level, your first level is just going to be 10. Second level is going to be 11. Third level, it's going to be really still going to be 11. It's kind of going to stair step a little bit there. And at 20th level, it will be 20. And what I wanted to try to portray is that the more powerful you get, the more your flaws are going to kind of come to the fore. I think that more powerful characters have more powerful impulses. I didn't want it to be something where it was overwhelming at low levels. And by the way, at low levels, when the party is going to be least equipped to deal with it. You know, if you're a first level, you go into the shop and suddenly you want to roll a compulsion, steal something, and you have to do it. It just becomes one of those things that I didn't want it to be. One, I didn't want it to feel like you were just going to fail every compulsion from the start. Two, I wanted it to be that the more tools you have, the more ready you are to face consequences, then the more consequences you're going to tend to get. And also at high levels, you may not feel the need. You may feel like, you know what, I don't need inspiration that much, so I'm not going to do it, which is fine too. But I wanted to have it kind of scale with your level, so it actually stays challenging all the way up. And it has no requisite. You're just going to roll dice. So you're not going to roll against con or int or anything else. You don't get proficiency on it. You're just going to roll. So you're going to start off with basically a 50% chance to avoid it. And it's going to go up to basically no percent chance. Though I would say in a game, if someone wanted to give you inspiration or some other way of earning advantage, I would say that's fine. But I don't, again, maybe I should write in here. I don't think you should be able to add inspiration to overcoming it. Like, I don't think you should be cycling through inspiration. Of course, I don't know why you would, because you'd have inspiration already. Then you wouldn't need to compel yourself to try to get more inspiration, but whatever. So you're going to roll against that. Now, just like with ideals, I have two different ones. You can accept one flaw and have it be a major flaw. Or you can accept two flaws and have them be minor flaws. If it's a major flaw, you're going to make that with disadvantage. So you're more apt to fail it. But if you have minor flaws, then you just roll. And it's kind of the same thing about if it's a major flaw, it's something that is, you know, if your only flaw is greed, then the idea is that it's a more powerful flaw. If you have minor flaws, they're not as powerful in your brain. So that's the kind of the idea behind that. But you're going to get inspiration whether you succeed or you fail. It's not, the die roll is simply to drive you towards the next action. As soon as you decide to face that compel, to look at that compulsion and test yourself against it, you get inspiration. The die roll is just to see whether you actually act on it or not. So if you fail the die roll, now you have to try to get that seal. You have to act on it. If you succeed on the die roll, then you've overcome that compulsion. But either way, you get inspiration. The idea here is you get inspiration for facing this flaw. It doesn't matter. I'm not interested in whether you particularly succeed at this time or not, because you're going to succeed sometimes. You're going to fail sometimes. The idea is that you're putting it in play, which to me is the important part, because I think that overall everything will work out, particularly as you go up levels and it gets harder to overcome your flaws. If you succeed sometimes, you fail sometimes, whatever. And even if if you decide to use Bardic Inspiration or some other thing to get you advantage on some of these rolls or get you some bonuses, that's fine too, because the party is, in a sense, I kind of like it because you have the party working together. Like, oh gosh, the rogue, I see his eye twitching and he's looking at that seal. Someone gives him kind of a stern eye and the bard goes, oh, I sent him Bardic Inspiration to help him with that compel. I feel like that's a good use of something like Bardic Inspiration. So I would roll with that. But the idea here is when you as the player decide to face it, there you go. You get inspiration. And if you succeed on your roll, great. You overcame it. If you didn't, you didn't. But the attempt, putting these flaws in play, which is something that I don't think happens enough. And this was, I hope, a way for getting them into your game in a way that's character driven. Not based on your combat prowess. It's not based on how much damage you do. This is based on you playing your character. And I hope that giving that kind of carrot to, hey, look, here's an advantage of playing your character that as a player you're going to do. And maybe even the players of the party will talk to each other and say, look, we're going to be going, I know we're going to be going in a really hard situation soon. None of us have any inspiration. I think we should do some things to try to get it. Let's do that. I think that's good because in the fiction, it's going to be these weaknesses of the characters coming through, which I think we see in all the fiction that we consume. So I think it's a good idea that we try to bring that into the game. I think a lot of the role playing that we appreciate, whether we're at the table or watching it, things like Critical Role, are when characters struggle against their weaknesses and struggle to fulfill their ideals. And so I wanted to bring that in a way that made mechanical sense, I hope. So I mentioned at the beginning, just to kind of finish things off, that I like inspiration, and I think that inspiration can be used. I'd like to use it in more ways. One of the ways that haven't really seen mentioned before that I think it would be a good use for it is for rule of cool. If you haven't heard of rule of cool, it's something we often hear usually in more GM, DM centered discussions about when players want to try stuff that's either not covered by the rules or sort of bends the rules, or bends things like settings or bends physics or whatever. That you say, hey, if it's cool, let it go, let them do it. And I'm not opposed to rule cool. I think the rule cool is good, though. I feel like there are certain ways, like I don't want in my games, I want the setting to be consistent, and whatever rule of cool thing you're doing has to kind of fit into the setting. If I'm running sort of a gritty, down to earth sort of setting, and that's what I'm running, then your rule of cool has to be gritty and down to earth. I'm not going to be doing, peasant railguns in my setting, even if it is cool. Or if someone built a rocket out of whatever, it's like out of a floating disc and I don't know, whatever else. It just doesn't fit into my setting. So like for me, it's like, well, where does it fit? But I'll bend stuff within the setting. And of course there's magic and stuff. So there's some wiggle room, but that wiggle room only goes so far. And I'm not going to explode the concept of my setting for cool. And I think that's something that I feel like at GMs just in general, you get these people who are just adamant that no matter what it is, just you rule of cool it. And it's a little bit unfair because not everyone's running kind of a high magic sort of gonzo game where that makes sense. And I think you have to be true to your setting. And as a player, I want that too. Like I wouldn't want to be playing Harn or something, and then the next player next to me, and I'm really kind of in that system and enjoying that setting and kind of being, again, sort of gritty and down to earth and everything. And then one guy decides to MacGyver up a peasant railgun. I would be annoyed as a player. So it's not even just me as a GM. I just think that, but if I'm in some kind of crazy gonzo setting, then yeah, I expect crazy gonzo stuff. And I feel like at that point, crazy gonzo stuff should just be, the norm. So, it's all relative. But one of the problems I have sometimes with rule of cool is that I have found, and this not even in terms of someone invoking or me saying, hey, rule of cool, I'm going to give that to you. But a lot of times players, they'll come up with something and it's funny and you want to allow it and it's cool. So you say, good, it works. And then they start to do it over and over again. I think a lot of times the kind of rule of cool type stuff should be like MacGyver. They don't use the same trick twice, right? It works once. You're fighting on the beach and you do the whole sand in the eyes. Great. That's fun. It's thematic. Then, but sometimes I've seen it where it just devolves into every fight. It's like I find some sand, or now I'm carrying around pockets full of sand, and it's kind of it takes away from the game. It just, to me, it sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, I got pockets of sand rules in my game, and it's great, and that's fine. That's your game. But to me, often these things are great because they work thematically in a moment, in a big fight, and it's great, and it's just like this great moment, ha! Or they chop in the throat, and that stops something from happening. Oh, that's cool, I'm gonna do it. And then every fight is I chop in the throat. And it's like it's not cool anymore. It's not thematic. It's not in that moment. But they've just seized on the fact that they got it once, so they're just going to get it over and over again. And you, as the GM, have a hard time saying, I wanted to give it to you the first time because it was cool, but now you're relying on it, and I don't want to give you it all the time, but I already gave it to you. So what do I do? So my idea here was to tie inspiration to rule of cool, that the players can throw down their inspiration and say, all right, I want to use my inspiration to give me this rule of cool thing. And it's kind of like you're paying to sort of bend these rules so that, what, if you're always going to carry an inspiration on you, then yeah, you can have your bags of sand and throw them in the eyes or whatever, but you only have that because the limits on inspiration. The max amount of times you can do it is, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 times in a session, because I don't know how often you're going to get inspiration, have inspiration, spend it, get it back, spend it. Not very often. So you're not going to be able to do that in every encounter or multiple times in an encounter where, like some silly sequence where some guy's running around the battlefield just throwing sand in everybody's eyes to blind them. You're going to get it a very limited time. And that way it keeps that specialness. And you hope that, again, people usually tend to hold on to inspiration until something really big is coming. So the idea is here is if you're going to have this trick in your, this is your trick. You're the rogue, and hey, my trick is pocket of sand to the eyes. Now you have a reason to hold on to your inspiration. If you're using this flaws system that I just went through, you have a reason to get inspiration. And then when that big fight comes, because you're only going to get kind of one shot at it, You're going to wait to that moment when you really think it's worthwhile, and then you're going to throw your sand in the eyes, which to me is what I want out of Rule Cool. I don't want Rule Cool to become expanding the kind of gonzo-ness of craziness of what you're doing, and then you just, that sort of, what do we call it? That you're setting bad precedents, or you're setting precedents directions you don't want to go in the name of coolness. And some people say, well, that never happens, but I've seen it happen throughout my years a lot. People will take something, they'll try to expand it. When they get that part, then they try to expand it. And maybe it's a player type. I had so many conversations about floating disk in an OSR game because a player would want it to get it, a little bit. And I might say, yeah, it's reasonable. I'll give you this a little bit more. But they're not satisfied. Oh, I got this a little bit more. Oh, well, maybe now I can do this a little bit more. Having something where you're saying, look, if you have inspiration, I'll let you push it. When you don't have inspiration, you can't push it. It's transparent to the players. It saves a lot of headaches of these ever-expanding rules or house rules or ever-expanding things that people are trying to do that don't really add to the quality of the game. I know a player's going to say, well, I get advantage on it, or it blinds him and helps the team. But thematically, these things can kind of take over. So the idea here is you limit it to inspiration. Spend inspiration, do something cool. It's up to you. With a system like this, they're going to have a method to consistently gain inspiration if they want it. And so they'll have this currency where once or twice, 3 times in a session, times however many players you have, they'll be able to pull out cool stuff. I wouldn't say that it's just whatever they throw inspiration, it's a conversation. Now you throw inspiration and now you have a moon catapult. It's, you have inspiration, then you talk about what you're trying to do and how feasible did you work on it. But the fact is that they're spending a resource to then get a cool thing. It gives you a way to put it in perspective as far as cost. It gives them a very transparent way to get it. It's not about, because the whole thing with the Rule Cool, it's a little bit off, is that it's that who thinks it's cool. If I think it's cool as a player, then I feel like I should say, hey, DM, you should give it to me because of Rule of Cool. But as the GM, if I'm going, I don't think that's cool, does it then not qualify? Because it's like, well, I don't think it's cool. Should we do a table vote? Does everybody, all that nonsense? This way you can make a clear transaction. Whoa. I should have turned the volume down on my PC. There we go. So the idea here is that you get a clear transaction that's transparent. Everybody knows where they stand. Everybody knows this currency. They know how to get it. They know what they can spend it on. And so I hope that gives a little nice system for utilizing inspiration, utilizing kind of flaws and ideals I don't think get used enough in the game, even though they exist in one form or another. And there you have a mechanism for putting it all together and, adding it in and seeing what it does for you. So I put that on my Patreon. I don't think in the stream I can add links. If I can figure out a way to link in there, I will do that. Otherwise, this will be up on YouTube shortly, and that will have links to it. Or you just go to my Patreon, patreon.com/hexpress, and you can find the link there to Ideals and Flaws. If you do use it in your game, please let me know how it goes. Hey, I would love if you follow me here on Twitch. Give it a like or a heart or whatever. On YouTube, give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. If you like these videos on YouTube, please subscribe. That helps me out a lot. But thanks very much, and I will talk to you later.